Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond Life Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host, Russell Reynolds, and we are back on a Friday night. My guest tonight couldn't be on; he had to reschedule, so he will be with us next week. Um, my guest next week will be Jody Cook from the North American Dogman Project. We're going to do a part two. He had sent me some compelling evidence that we're going to show live. So, so he won't be on tonight, and he'll be on next week. Gonna plug two events real quick. I don't have the flyers up because I don't have room on my screen, but Bordertown Paracon, August 8th. We will be there, free admission, so you don't have to get tickets for that one. Um, my dad and I are presenters. We are presenting at 3:40 p.m. So if you're coming out, that's when we're going to be guest speaking. There's going to be a lot of good teams out there. So come on out and check that out. And then the weekend after, we will be headlining Crypticon KC for the paranormal portion. We speak on the panel 2 days, Saturday 8 p.m. and then Sunday at noon. We are the openers for the Sunday panel. Um, just be, we're on just before the cast of the Munsters. So from what I heard, the hotels are about sold out. So if you're going to get your VIP tickets for the silver, get them now because from what I heard, there's not very many left. It's almost sold out. So, but they still honor general admission at the door. You can still buy the general admission ones online, which you'll have to stand in a general admission line. The silver gets you in 30 minutes early, so all 3 days. So that gets you access to all of us. Um, hey, Gary, welcome in. The show tonight, since my guest had to reschedule, I figured I've been asked by my viewer Gary about doing one on Tombstone, Arizona. So, and it fits with coming off the last week's show with the outlaw Jesse James. Now we're going to talk about Tombstone, Arizona, the OK Corral, the gunfight that sparked the movie Tombstone, which was one of the better Wyatt Earp movies. Smoke it if you got it. Funny. But that's what we're going to talk about tonight, and then we're going to talk about the hauntings of Tombstone, Arizona. We'll go down through the history, talk about the Earps, the Clantons, and the big 30-second gunfight. Thank you, kind sir. Maybe I'll see Tombstone, Arizona one day. I've seen the movie twice. Hey, Sandy, welcome in. Yeah, Gary, that's on my bucket list of places to go is Tombstone, Arizona. I'd like to go there and investigate. Um, so, as you know, many of you probably don't know this about Tombstone, Arizona. Hey, Mike, welcome in. Tombstone, Arizona was actually founded, the Native Americans lived there. Jerome, Arizona is supposed to be a good spot. Yeah, I've heard that as well, too. Um, so, Tombstone, Arizona was founded on land historically inhabited by the Hohokam people who lived in southern Arizona for over 2,000 years. The town was established in 1879 on the mesa above the Goodenough Mine. You know, as a mining town back then, too. By the 1880s, the town had many saloons, gambling halls, dance halls, brothels. It also boasted 4 churches, 3 newspapers, 2 banks, and an ice house and an ice cream parlor in those days. And more respectable dioceses of tombstones attended theatrical productions presented by the visiting troops at the Shefflin Hall, while the miners and cowboys preferred shows at the Birdcage Theater. Underlining political tensions rapidly escalated as the population increased. The townspeople and the owners of the mines were largely from the northern states, while the ranchers were mostly Confederate sympathizers. Only 8, 30 miles from Mexico United States border, the city was a market for cattle stolen from ranches in Sonora, Mexico, by a loosely organized band of outlaws known as the Cochise County Boys. The Earp brothers, Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan and Doc Holliday, had ongoing conflicts with the Cowboys, Ike and Billy Clanton, Frank and Tom McLaury, and Billy Claiborne. The Cowboys repeatedly threatened the Earps until the conflict escalated into a gunfight on October 26th of 1881. Although the gunfight is often portrayed as occurring at the OK Corral, it actually occurred a short distance away in an empty lot on Fremont Street. So it didn't actually happen in the OK Corral. Beginning in 1880, silver mines penetrated the water table, requiring the installation of pumps to dewater the mines. In 1886, a fire destroyed the pumping station, and it was deemed unprofitable to rebuild the costly pumps. The city nearly became a ghost town, saved only by the fact that it was the seat of Cochise County at the time. The city's population dwindled from 1,875 in 1890 to the low as 646 in 1910, but grew to 1,380 by 2010. Tombstone has frequently been noted on lists of unusual place names. Now, the founding of Tombstone was founded in 1880 by this man right here. His name is Ed Schiffling. There's a show called The Haunted History, and one episode they told the history of Tombstone. Hey, Jeanette, welcome in. But the town Tombstone was founded by him. Ed Schiffling was a United States Army Indian scout during the Apache Wars. While stationed at the would later become Fort Hushkara, he searched the surrounding area looking for ore. 3 people had recently been killed by Apache warriors at the Santa Rita mines in nearby Santa Cruz Valley. When friend and fellow Army Scout Al Cyber learned that Schifflin was up to, he reportedly told him, "The only rock you will find out there will be your own tombstone. According to an earlier version of the story, better take your coffin with you. You will find your tombstone there and nothing else." In 1877, Ed Schifflin used Bronakow's cabin as a base of operations to survey the area. After many months while working the hills east of the San Pedro River, he found silver ore and a dry wash. On a high plateau called Goose Flats, it took him several more months to locate the source. When he located the vein, he estimated it to be 50 feet long and 12 inches wide. Schifflin took on a partner named William Griffith to finance the filing of the claim in return for a later claim for himself. Griffith filed Schifflin's first claim, which was named Tombstone, on September 3rd, 1877. Another account says that the first claim was called Graveyard because it proved worthless and no other reason. When the first claims were filed, the initial settlement of the tents wooden shacks were located at Waterville near the Lucky Cuss mine with a population of about 100. The Good Enough mine strike occurred shortly after. Former Territorial Governor Anison P.K. Sanford offered financial backing for the share of the mining claims, and the Schifflin, his borrower Al, and their partner Richard Gerd formed the Tombstone Mining and Drilling Company and built a stamp mill near the San Pedro River, about 8 miles away. As the mill was being built, U.S. Deputy Mineral Surveyor Solon M. Alice finished surveying the new town site in March of 1879. The tents and the shacks near the Lucky Cuss were moved up to the new town site on Goose Flats, a mesa above the Good Enough mine, about 4,539 feet above sea level and large enough to hold a growing town. Lots were immediately sold on Allen Street for $5 each. The town soon had some 40 cabins and about 100 residents. At the town's founding in March of 1879, it took its name from the Shefflin's initial mining claim. By the late 1879, a few thousand hardy souls were living in the tent camp, perched amidst the richest silver strike in Arizona Territory. On September 9th of 1880, the richly appointed Grand Hotel was opened, adorned with fine oil paintings, thick carpets, toilet stands, elegant chandeliers, silk-covered furniture, walnut furniture, and a kitchen with hot and cold running water. The city was also host to Kelly's Wine House, featuring wine imported from Europe, cigars, and bowling alley, and many other amenities come to large cities. February 1st of 1881, following an act by the 11th Arizona Territorial Legislature, Cochise County was created from the eastern portion of Pima County, and Tombstone was designated as the county seat. Telegraph service to the town was established that same month on February 21st of 1881. The village of Tombstone was incorporated as the city of Tombstone and territory of Arizona. In early March of 1880, the Shefflin's Tombstone Mining and Milling Company, which owned the original Goodenough mine and the nearby Tough Nut mine, among others, was sold to investors from Philadelphia. A few months later, it was reported that the Tough Nut mine was working a vein of silver ore 90 feet across at $170 per ton, with some ores assaying at 22,000 a ton. Some of the early conflicts for Tombstone sheriff and constituents from March 1884 edition of Harper's New Monthly Magazine, maps of southeastern Arizona Territory included Tuscan and Tombstone in 1880, Panorama of Tombstone in 1909, and Fremont and 2nd Streets, and Tombstone in 1909 from upper floor of Cochise County Courthouse on the 3rd. At the time, theft of cattle, smuggling of alcohol and tobacco across Mexico-United States border about 30 miles from Tombstone were common. The Mexican government taxed these items heavily, and smugglers earned a handsome profit by sneaking these products across the border. The illegal cross-border smuggling contributed in the lawlessness of the region. Many of these crimes were carried out by the outlaw elements labeled cowboys, a loosely organized band of friends and acquaintances who teamed up for various crimes. They came to each other's aid. The San Francisco Examiner wrote in an editorial, "Cowboys are the most reckless class of outlaws in the wild country, infinitely worse than the ordinary robber." At the time, the Cochise County, it was an insult to call the legitimate cattleman a cowboy. Legitimate cowmen were referred to as cattle herders or ranchers. Cowboys were nonetheless welcome in town because of their free spending habits, but shootings were common. And then we come to the fight at the OK Corral, um, which I do have a picture. Hey, welcome in. I do have a picture. They do still do reenactments at the OK Corral. They reenact the gunfight there that happened between uh got Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Morgan Earp, and Virgil Earp against Mike Clanton, who was known as the Coward, uh, Frank Stillwell, and his brother, which I couldn't find a picture on them, but they were the ones, and it was only like a 30-second battle, I believe, and On the evening of March 15th of 1881, three Cochise County cowboys attempted to rob the Kiner and Company stagecoach, carrying 26,000 in silver bullion, which is what they which is equivalent to $867,414 in 2025. En route from Tombstone to Benson, the nearest railroad freight terminal, they attacked the stagecoach near Drew Station just outside Contention City. Eli Bud Pilflot, a popular and well-known driver, and a passenger named Peter Rurig, riding in the rear dicky seat, were both shot and killed. Deputy U.S. Marshal Virgil Earp, with his temporary deputies and brothers Wyatt Earp and Morgan Earp, pursued the suspects. That set off the chain of events that accumulated on October 26th of 1881 in a gunfight in a vacant lot owned by the photographer C.S. Fly near the OK Corral, during which the lawman and Doc Holliday killed Tom McLaury and Frank McLaury and Billy Clanton. 2 months later, on the evening of December 8th of 1881, Virgil Earp was ambushed and seriously wounded in the streets of Tombstone by hidden assailants, shooting from a second story of an unfinished building. Although identified suspects provided witnesses who supplied alibis, and the men who were not prosecuted on March 18th of 1882, while Morgan Earp playing billiards at 10 p.m., which you guys probably remember this from the Tombstone movie, at Campbell and Hatch and Allen Street in the heart of Tombstone's still current downtown. He was killed by a shot through a window that struck his spine as Wyatt looked on. Once again, the assailants were named but escaped arrest due to legal technicalities. Wyatt Earp concluded that the official justice was out of reach. Armed with warrants obtained by the via U.S. Marshal Service, he led a posse of deputy marshals on which became known as the Earp Vendetta Ride, pursuing and killing four of the men they held responsible. Much of the cowboy-related crime subsided after the Earp family left Arizona in early of 1882. John Horton Slaughter was elected Cochise County Sheriff in 1886 and served 2 terms. He hired Bert Alvord, who was a 15-year-old boy who had, as a 15-year-old boy, witnessed the shootout between the Earps and the Cowboys. Alfred served very effectively for 3 years until he began to drink heavily and associate with outlaws, as had Earp era County Sheriff Johnny Behan, which you remember in the movie. Johnny Behan was the sheriff when the Earps come in the Tombstone, and Behan wanted to arrest the Earps for that fight by the OK Corral. A close friend and constant protector of the law-breaking Clanton family and their friends. And then it goes to the monument, the Ed Schifflin Monument tombstone boom, but the founder, F. Schifflin, was more interested in prospecting than owning a mine. Ed and one-third partners of, with his brother Al Schifflin and Richard Gerd. There were several hundred mining claims near Tombstone, although most productive were immediately south of town. These included Good Enough, Tough Nut, Contention, Grand Central, Lucky Cuss, Emerald, and Silver Thread. Due to the lack of readily available water near town, mills were built along the San Pedro River about 9 miles away, leading to the establishment of several small mill towns, including Charleston, Contention City, and Fairbanks. Schifflin left Tombstone to find more ore, and when he returned 4 months later, Gerd had lined up buyers for their interest in the Contention claim, which they sold for $10,000. It would later yield millions in silver. They sold a half interest in the Lucky Cuss, and the other half turned into a steady stream of money. Al Schifflin later sold their 2/3 interest in the Tough Nut for $1 million, and sometimes later Gerd sold his 1/3 interest for the same amount. There is widely Varying estimates of the value of gold silver mining during the course of Tombstone's history. The mines produced 30 million troy ounces, which is 1,000 metric tons of silver, more than any other mining district in Arizona. In 1883, writer Patrick Hamilton estimated that during the first years of activity, the mines produced about 25 million, approximately 864 million today. Other estimates include $40 40 million to 85 million, about 1.3 billion to 3.5 billion today. Renewed mining is planned for the area. And then the mining kind of just declined by the mid 1881s. The town had fancy restaurants, Bogan's Bowling Alley, four churches, Catholic, Episcopal, Presbyterian, and Methodist churches, an ice house, a school, a Shefflin Hall Opera House, two banks, three newspapers, an ice cream parlor, alongside 110 saloons, 14 gambling halls, several Chinese restaurants, French, two Italian, numerous Mexican, several upscale continental establishments, and many home cooking hotspots include Nellie Cashman's famous Rush House and numerous brothels, all situated among the top of a number of dirty hardscrabble mines. The Arizona Telephone Company began installing poles and lines for the city's first telephone service on March 15, 1881. Investors from northeastern United States brought many of the leading mining operations. The mining itself was carried out by immigrants from Europe, chiefly Cornwall, Ireland, and Germany. Chinese and Mexican labor provided services, including laundry, construction, restaurants, and hotels, but immigrant labor provoked backlash. An anti Chinese league was formed in the 1880s to boycott Chinese businesses and workers. Mines and stamp mills ran three shifts. Miners were paid union wages of $4 per working, 6 10-hour shifts per week. The roughly 6,000 men working in Tombstone generated more than 168,000 a week, which is around 5,805,000 today in income. Most of the young single male population spent their hard-earned cash on Allen Street, the major commercial center, open 24 hours a day. In 1882, the Cochise County Courthouse was built at the cost around 45,000. Respectable folks saw traveling theater shows in Shefflin Hall, opened on June 8th of 1881. On December 25th of 1881, the Birdcage Theater opened on Allen Street, offering the miners and cowboys their kind of bawdy entertainment. One of the prime entertainments at the Birdcage Theater was Cornish wrestling competitions, with the results being regularly published in the UK. In 1882, the New York Times reported that the Birdcage Theater is the wildest, wickedest night spot between Bassin Street and the Barbary Coast. The Birdcage remained open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, till it closed its doors in 1889. Respectable women stayed on the north side of Allen Street, while prostitutes worked the saloons on the south side and in the southeast quarter of town. While some sources claim population reached 10,000 at its peak, official census records of the United States Department of Interior reported the population was 973 in 1880 and 1,875 in 1890. And then there was fires that ripped through the OK Corral. Um, Before we get into it, this guy right here is suspected of the one that shot Morganer while he was playing pool, which is there is Morganer right there. But the guy he's the one known for shooting Morgan Earp. Um, but he had an alibi and he was part of the Cowboys gang Um, and another guy that was part of that cowboy bunch is this man right here, Johnny Ringo, known as a quick draw as well with the gun. And then there was the Buffalo Billius, I believe is what they called them. That was part of the Cowboys, which was played by Powers Booth in Tombstone, the movie. Um, and we'll get into Johnny Ringo and the little mystery on him as well. But we'll get back to this. The fires after the May 25th of 1882 fire, the only remnant of the OK Corral was its sign. The blaze destroyed most of the western half of the business district due to poor building practices, poor fire protection common to boomtown construction. Tombstone was hit by two major fires. On June 22nd of 1881, the first fire destroyed the 66 businesses making up the eastern half of the business district. Fire began when a lit cigar ignited a barrel of whiskey in the arcade saloon. On May 25th of 1882, another more destructive fire started in the Chinese Laundry on Fifth Street between Tough Nut and Allen Streets. It destroyed the Grand Hotel and the Tivoli Saloon before it jumped Fremont Street, destroying more than 100 businesses and more of the business district. Lacking enough water to put out the flames, buildings in the fire path were dynamited to deny the fire fuel. Total damage is estimated to be $700 million, far more than estimated at 250,000 insurance coverage. But rebuilding started right away, nonetheless. In March of 1883, along a short stretch of Allen Street, drinking establishments were available in two of the principal hotels: Eagle Brewery, Can Chop House, French Rotisserie, Alhambra Saloon, Maison Drone City of Paris, Brown Saloon, Fashion Saloon, Miners Home, Kelly's Wine House, The Grotto, Tivoli, and two more unnamed saloons. And then the mines strike water. The Tough Nut mine first experienced seepage in 1880. In March of 1881, the Sulphurette mine struck water at 520 feet. A year later, in March of 1882, miners in New Shaft of Grand Central mine hit water at 602 feet. Flow was not at the first large enough to stop work, but experienced miners thought the water flow would increase, and it did. Soon, constant pumping with 4-inch pump was insufficient. The silver ore deposits they sought were soon underwater. Several mine managers traveled to San Francisco, met with principal owners of contention mines. They talked about the options for draining mines, and they found only a system available for pumping water out of mines below 400 feet was the Cornish engine, which had been used in Comstock Lode in the 1870s. They bought and installed the huge Cornish engines in the contention and Grand Central mines, but by mid-February of 1884, the engines were removing 576,000 U.S. gallons, which is 2,180,000 liters, 480,000 IMP gallons of water every 24 hours. The city merchants celebrated the continued success of mining and the transfer of funds to their businesses. The contention of the Grand Central found their pumps were draining the mining district, benefiting other mines as well, and the other companies refused to pay the proportion of the expense. On May 26 of 1886, the Grand Central hoist and pumping plant burned. Fire was so intense that the metal components of the Cornish engine melted and warped. The headworks of the main mine shaft were also destroyed. Shortly afterwards, the price of silver slid to 90 cents an ounce. The mines that remained operational laid off workers. Individuals who had thought about leaving Tombstone when the mine flooding started now took action. The price of silver briefly recovered for a while, and a few mines began producing again, but never at the level reached in the early 1800s. And now Tombstone sees a lot of tourism and stuff like that. Um, and we covered a little bit about the fight at the OK Corral, and the gunfight at the OK Corral pitted lawmen against members of a loosely organized group of cattle rustlers and horse thieves called the Cochise County Cowboys on October 26th of 1881. While lasting less than a minute, the gunfight had been the subject of many books and films taking place in the town of Tombstone, Arizona territory. The battle has become one archetype of American Old West. The gunfight was the result of a long, simmering feud between five outlaws, including two sets of brothers and four representatives of law, including three brothers. The trigger for the event was local marshals' decision to enforce a city ordinance that prohibited the carrying of weapons in the town. To enforce the ordinance, the lawmen would have to disarm the cowboys, which this is some a little bit of some of the history I didn't cover earlier on it. Let's see here. And the lawmen were three brothers, Virgil, Wyatt, and Morgan Earp, and Wyatt's close friend Doc Holliday. As deputy U.S. Marshal and town marshal, Virgil was in charge, and it was his decision to enforce the ordinance that led to the gunfight. His two brothers and Doc Holliday had been appointed temporary assistant marshals. At the time of the gunfight, there were five members of the Cowboys in Tombstone: Billy Claiborne, brothers Ike and Billy Clanton, and brothers Tom and Frank McLaury. Despite its name, the gunfight did not take place within or next to the OK Corral, which fronted Allen Street and had rear entrance line with horse stalls on Fremont Street. Shootout actually took place in a narrow lot on the side of CS Fly Photography Studio on Fairmont Street, 6 doors west of OK Corral's rear entrance. About 30 shots were fired in 30 seconds. During that brief battle, 3 men were killed, 3 were wounded, 2 ran away, and 1 fought but was unharmed. Ike Clanton subsequently filed murder charges against the Earps and Holiday. After a 30-day preliminary hearing and a brief stint in jail, the defendants were shown to have acted lawfully. The gunfight was not the end of the conflict. On December 28th of 1881, Virgil was ambushed and maimed in a murder attempt by the Cowboys. On March 8th of 1882, a cowboy fired from a dark alley through the glass door of the Campbell and Hatch saloon and billiard parlor, killing Morgan. The suspects in both incidents furnished alibis supplied by other cowboys and were not indicated. Wyatt, newly appointed as deputy U.S. Marshal in Cochise County, took matters into his own hands in a personal vendetta. He was pursued by County Sheriff Johnny Behan and had received a warrant from Tuscan for Wyatt's killing of Frank Stillwell. The gunfight was not widely known until 2 years after Wyatt Earp's death, when Stuart Blake published his 1931 book, Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal. The book was the basis for the 1939 film Frontier Marshal and 1946 film by My Darling Clementine, and the 1957 film Gunfight at OK Corral, after which the shootout became known by that name. The shootout was also depicted in the 93 film Tombstone and the 94 film Wyatt Earp. Since then, the conflict has been portrayed in numerous Western films and books and has become an archetype for much of the popular imaginary associated with the Old West. So Horse rustlers, bandits from the countrysides often came to town, and shootings were frequent. In 1880s, the theft of cattle and smuggling of alcohol and tobacco, which we covered that earlier. James, Virgil, and Wyatt Earp arrived in Tombstone on December 1st of 1879 when the town was mostly composed of tents as living quarters and a few saloons and other buildings and mines. Virgil had been hired as deputy U.S. Marshal for the eastern Pima County with his offices in Tombstone. Only days before his arrival, in June of 1881, he was also appointed as Tombstone's town marshal or police chief. Though not universally liked by the townspeople, the Earp brothers tended to protect the interests of the town's business owners and residents. Even so, Wyatt helped protect outlaw Curly Bill Brocious, which is the one that Powers Booth played in Tombstone movie, from being lynched after he accidentally killed Tombstone Town Marshal Fred White, which you see that also in the Tombstone movie. In contrast, Cochise County Sheriff Johnny Behan was generally sympathetic to the interests of the rural ranchers and members of the loosely organized outlaw group called the Cochise County Cowboys, or simply the Cowboys to which Brosis belonged to. In that time, the region, the term cowboy generally meant an outlaw, legitimate cowman, were instead referred to as cattle herders. And many of the sources describing the events leading up to the gunfight and details at the gunfight itself conflict with each other. Newspapers of the day were not above taking sides. The news reporting often editorialized on issues that reflect the publisher's interest. Oh, that's great. So if they were against the Earps, they made the Earps look like bad men. And the Tombstone's Epiphyt had helped organize the Committee of Safety Vigilante Committee in Tombstone in late September of 1881. He was elected as Tombstone's first mayor under the new city charter that year. Clum and his newspaper tended to side with interests of local business owners and supported Deputy U.S. Marshal Virgil Earp. Harry Woods, the publisher of the other major newspaper, the Daily Nugget, was an undersheriff to Behan. He and his newspaper tended to side with Behan, the Cowboys, some of whom were part-time ranchers and landowners, and some rural interests of the ranchers. Much of what is known of the event is based on month-long preliminary hearings held afterwards, generally known as the Spicer hearings. Reporters from both newspapers covered the hearings and recorded the testimony there in the coroner's inquest, but only the reporter from the Nugget knew shorthand. The testimony recorded by the court and recorder and the two newspapers varied greatly according to the Ertz version of events. The fight was in self-defense because the Cowboys, armed in violation of the local ordinance, defied a law order to hand in their weapons and drew their pistols instead. The Cowboys maintained that they raised their hands, offered no resistance, and were shot cold blood by the Earth. Sorting out who was telling the truth that was difficult then remains so to this day. Though usually opposing each other in their depiction of events, reporting by both the Epiphyt and the Nugget initially supported the lawman's version of events. Woods, the publisher of the pro-cowboy Nugget, was out of town during the hearings, and an experienced reporter, Richard Rule, wrote the story. The Nugget staff had a close relationship with Behan, but Rule's story, as printed in the Nugget the day after the shootout, backed the Earps account. This varied widely from Behan and the Cowboys' later court testimony. The Quint stories about the gunfight published in the Nugget after that day supported Behan's and the Cowboys' view of events. Other stories in the Epiph continued. The Nugget later viewed entirely and supported the lawman, Dr. George Goodfellow, who examined the Cowboys after their deaths, told the court that the angle of the wound in Billy Clanton's wrist indicated that his hands could not have been in the air or holding his coats open by lapels, as witness loyal to the Cowboys testified. part-time newspaper Howl reported and transcribed a testimony from the hearings in the early 1930s as part of a federal writers project, which was part of the Works Progress Administration. According to one report, Hayhurst and his friend of the Behan family, after he completed the transcription, he kept the original document in his home where it was destroyed in a house fire. Origin of the conflict: Virgil Earp, wounded during the gunfight, was later ambushed by the cowboys. Wyatt Earp took matters into his own hands when the cowboys who ambushed Virgil and murdered Morgan went free. The interpersonal conflicts and feuds leading to the gunfight were complex. Each side had strong family ties. The brothers James Virgil, Wyatt Morgan, and Warren Earp were all tight-knit family, working together as lawmen, pimps, and saloon owners in several frontier towns, among other occasions, and had moved together from one town to another. Virgil served in the Union Army during the American Civil War and in 1877 became a police officer in Prescott, Arizona territory. He followed that with a job as a night watchman before he became constable. Wyatt had held jobs as either a guard or a police officer in the cattle drive towns of Wichita and Dodge City, Kansas. James Virgil and Wyatt Earp, together with their wives, arrived in Tombstone, Arizona, December 1st of 1879 during the early period of rapid growth associated with mining when there were only a few hundred residents. Virgil was appointed deputy U.S. Marshal shortly before he arrived. And Morgan and Warren Earp also moved to Tombstone. Wyatt arrived hoping he could leave lawing behind. He bought a stagecoach only to find the business was already very competitive. The Earps invested together in several mining claims, water rights. The Earps were Republicans who had never worked as cowmen or ranchers. And then the Earps quickly came into conflict with Frank and Tom McLary, Billy and Ike Clanton, Johnny Ringo, and William Curly Bill Brocious, among others. They were part of the large, loose association of cattle smugglers and horse thieves known as the Cowboys Outlaws and had been implicated in various crimes. Ike Clanton was prone to drinking heavily and threatened the Earp brothers numerous times. Tombstone resident George Parson wrote in his diary, "A cowboy is a rustler at times, and a rustler is a synonym for desperado, bandit, outlaw, and horse thief." San Francisco Examiner wrote in an editorial, "Cowboys are the most reckless class of outlaws in that wild country." Initially worse, the ordinary robbers during that 1880s in Cochise County was an insult to call the legitimate cattleman a cowboy. Cowboys teamed up for various crimes and came to each other's aid. Virgil thought that some of the cowboys had met at Charleston and taken an oath over blood drawn from the army of Johnny Ringo, the leader, that they would kill us. The Earps as lawmen. Among the lawmen involved in the OK Corral shooting, only Virgil had any real experience in combat. Virgil had been constable in Prescott and was the deputy United States Marshal in Tombstone. He was appointed deputy U.S. Marshal for Eastern Pima County by the U.S. Marshal Crawley Dake on November 27, 1879, before the Earps arrived in Tombstone on December 1st. He was appointed as Tombstone's acting town marshal on September 30th of 1880 after popular Tombstone Marshal Fred White was accidentally shot and killed by Brocious. Wyatt had been a deputy city marshal in Kansas as well as deputy sheriff in Tombstone. Only 6 weeks later, Virgil ran for office on November 12th of 1880, but lost to Ben Sippy. However, on June 6, 1881, Sippy asked for a 2-week leave of absence. The city soon discovered 3,000, equivalent to 100,000 in 2025, in financial improprieties in Sippy's records. A few days later, Virgil was appointed as town marshal in his place. At the time of the gunfight, Virgil was both deputy U.S. Marshal and town marshal. City suspended him as town marshal after Ike Clanton filed murder charges. After Wyatt first arrived in Tombstone, his business efforts yielded little profit. He took a job as a stagecoach shotgun messenger for Wells Fargo, guarding shipments of silver bullion. On July 28th of 1880, Wyatt was appointed Pima County Deputy Sheriff. He held this position for only 3 months until after the election of November 9th in 1880 when he resigned. When Virgil was maimed by an assassination attempt, Wyatt was appointed Deputy U.S. Marshal in his place. He held that position until he left Cochise County in April of 1882. Wyatt was an imposing, handsome man, blond, 6 foot tall, weighing 165 to 170 pounds, broad shouldered, long armed, and muscular. He had been a boxer and was rep- reputed to be an expert with a pistol. According to author Leo Silver, Earp showed no fear of any man. Wyatt had been an assistant marshal when he and a policeman, James Masterson, which would you remember the show Bat Masterson, along with a few other citizens, fired their pistols at several cowboys who were fleeing town after shooting up a theater. Member of the group George Hoyt, sometimes spelled Hoy, was shot in the arm and died of his wound a month later. Wyatt always claimed to have been the one to shoot Hoyt. Although it could have been anyone among the lawmen, Wyatt had developed a reputation as a no-nonsense, hard-nosed lawman, but prior to the gunfight, he had been involved in only one other shooting in Dodge City, Kansas during the summer of 1878. In the 31 book Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal was the best-selling biography by Stuart N. Lake. Established Wyatt Earp's role as a fearless lawman in the American Old West and the legend of the gunfight at the OK Corral. In the public consciousness, 30, but Lake and many others in the popular media widely exaggerated Wyatt's role as a central figure in the gunfight. It was only discovered much later that Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal, based on 8 interviews with Earp, was largely fictional. The book and later Hollywood portrayals embellished Wyatt's reputation and magnifying his mystique as a Western lawman. Morgan Earp had been a police officer in Montana, but had no known experience with gunfighting prior to their arrival in Tombstone. While Wyatt was Pima County Deputy Sheriff in July 27th of 1880, Morgan Earp took over his job as shotgun messenger for Wells Fargo. Morgan was occasionally assisted Virgil, and at the time of the gunfight was a special deputy policeman and drawing pay. Doc Holliday had a reputation as a gunman and had reportedly been in 9 shootouts during his life, although it has only been verified that he killed 3 men. One well-documented episode occurred on July 19th of 1879 when Holliday and his business partner, former Deputy Marshal John Joshua Webb, were seated in their saloon in Las Vegas, New Mexico. Former U.S. Army scout Mike Gordon got into a loud argument with one of the saloon girls whom he wanted to take with him. Gordon stormed from the saloon and began firing his revolver into the building. Before Gordon could get off his second shot, Holliday killed him. Holliday was tried for murder but acquitted, mostly based on the testimony of Webb. Holliday had saved Wyatt Earp's life one time and had become a close friend. He had been living in Prescott, Arizona territory and making a living as a gambler since late 1879. There he first met future Tombstone Sheriff Johnny Behan, and sometime gambler and saloon owner. In late September 1880, Holliday followed the Earps into Tombstone. The Rural Cowboys versus Tombstone interest, further information, Cochise Cowboys and Cowboys in the Old West. Ike Clanton swore multiple times he would kill the Earps, but ran from the gunfight. The ranch owned by Newman Hayes Clanton near Charleston, Arizona, was believed to be the local center for the Cowboys' illegal activities. Tom and Frank McLaury worked with the rustlers buying, selling stolen cattle. Many of the rural ranchers and cowboys resented the growing influence of the city residents over county politics and law enforcement. Ranchers largely maintained control of the country outside Tombstone due in large part of the sympathetic support and of Cochise County Sheriff Johnny Behan, who favored the cowboys and rural ranchers, and also grew intensely disliked the Earps. Behan tended to ignore the Earps' complaints about the McLaurys and Clantons. Horse thieving and cattle rustling, the Earps were known to bend the law in their favor when it affected their gambling and saloon interests, which earned them further amenity with the cowboy faction. Prevalent law in Tombstone to reduce crime in Tombstone on April 19th, 1881, City Council passed Ordinance 9 requiring anyone carrying a bowie knife, dirk pistol, or rifle to deposit their weapons in livery or saloons soon after entering town. To provide against carrying of deadly weapons, Section 1, it was hereby declared unlawful to carry in the hand or upon the person or otherwise any deadly weapon within the limits of the said city of Tombstone without first obtaining a permit in writing. This prohibition did not extend to persons immediately leaving or entering the city who with good faith and within reasonable time are proceeding to deposit or take from the place of deposit such deadly weapon. Section 3 said all firearms of every description and bowie knives and dirks are all included within the prohibited nation of the ordinance. Tombstone City Ordinance Number 9 effective April 19th of 1881. The Earps knew that the McLaurys and Clantons were reputed to be mixed up in the robbery and murder of Skeleton Canyon. Wyatt Earp said in his testimony after the shootout, I naturally kept my eyes open and I did not intend that any of the gang should get the drop on me if I could help it. Earp blues the sheriff's office to Behan. Further information on his service as lawman in Tombstone, Johnny Behan. Pima County Sheriff Charles A. Schibel appointed Wyatt Earp as deputy sheriff over eastern Pima County on July 27th in 1880, which I think I do have a picture of him. Let's go through the chat here. Hey, Barbara, welcome in. That in my picture right there, Gary, is Johnny Ringo. He was the leader of that band of cowboys that were in Tombstone. Wasn't Doc Holliday shot in Deadwood, South Dakota? I don't think so. Doc Holliday ended up dying of tuberculosis in Tombstone, I believe. But Schibel appointed Wyatt Earp as deputy sheriff over the eastern Pima County. On July 27, 1880, Pima County Sheriff Charles A. Schibel, whose offices were in the county seat of Tuscan, appointed Wyatt Earp as deputy sheriff. On October 28th of 1880, Tombstone Marshal Fred White attempted to disarm some late-night revelers who were shooting their pistols in the air. When he attempted to disarm Curly Bill Brocious, the gun discharged, striking White in the abdomen. Wyatt saw the shooting and pistol whipped Brocious, knocking him unconscious, and arrested him. Wyatt later told his biographer, John Flood, that he thought Brocious was still armed at the time and he did not see Brocious' pistol on the ground. Brocious waived the preliminary hearing so he and his case could immediately transfer to Tuscan. Wyatt and a deputy took Brocious in a wagon the next day to Tuscan to stand trial, possibly saving him from being lynched. Wyatt testified that he thought the shooting was accidental. It was also demonstrated that Broch's pistol could be fired from half-cock. Fred White left a statement before he died 2 days later that the shooting was not intentional. Based on the evidence presented, Brochus was not charged with White's death. Tombstone Council convinced and appointed Virgil Earp as temporary assistant city marshal to replace White for the salary of $100 per month, equivalent to $3,300 in 2025, until an election could be held on November 12th. For the next few weeks, Virgil represented federal and local law enforcement, and Wyatt represented Pima County. In the November 2nd, 1880 election for Pima County Sheriff, Democrat Shibble ran against Republican Bob Paul, who was expected to win. Votes arrived late as November 7th, and Shibble was unexpectedly reelected. He immediately appointed Johnny Behan as the new deputy sheriff for the eastern Pima County, a job that Wyatt wanted. A controversy ensured that Paul uncovered the ballot stuffing by cowboys, and he sued to overturn the election, while San Simon precinct east of Tombstone only had 10 registered voters. Shibble won that precinct with 103 votes to 1. Ike Clanton was the election inspector, and Johnny Ringo was one of the election judges. Paul finally became sheriff in April of 1881, but it was too late to reappoint Wyatt Earp as deputy sheriff because on February 1st in 1881, the eastern portion of Pima County containing Tombstone had been split off into the new Cochise County, which would need its own sheriff based in the county's largest city, Tombstone. This position was filled by a political appointment from the governor, and Wyatt and Behan both wanted the job. Cochise County Sheriff's position was worth more than $40,000 a year, equivalent to $1.3 million in 2025. Because the office holder was also the county assessor and tax collector, and the Board of Surveyors allowed him to keep 10% of the amounts paid. Behan used his existing position as his superior political connections to successfully lobby the position. He also promised Wyatt a position as his undersheriff. He was also appointed over Wyatt. Wyatt withdrew from the political contest, and the governor and legislator appointed Behan to the job of Cochise County Sheriff. February 10th of 1881, Behan reneged on his deal with Earp and appointed Harry Woods as undersheriff instead. Behan said he broke his promise to appoint Earp because Wyatt Earp used Behan's name to threaten Ike Clanton when Wyatt recovered the stolen horse from Clanton. The early conflicts with the Cowboys, tensions between the Earp family and both Clanton and McLaury clans increased, though 1881 on July 25th of 1880, Captain Joseph H. Hurst of Company A, 12th U.S. Infantry and commanding officer of Fort Bennett, asked Deputy U.S. Marshal Virgil Earp to help him track cowboys who had stolen 6 U.S. Army mules from Camp Rucker. This was a federal matter because the animals were U.S. property. Hurst bought 4 soldiers, and Virgil invited Wyatt and Morgan, as well as Wells Fargo agent Marshall Williams. The posse found the mules on McLaury's ranch and found McCormy Creek, northwest of Tombstone, as well as the branding iron used to change the U.S. brand to D8. To avoid bloodshed, cowboy Frank Patterson promised Hurst they would return the mules, and Hurst persuaded the posse to withdraw. Hurst went to the nearby Charleston, but the cowboys showed up 2 days later without the mules, laughing at Hurst and the Earps. In response, Hurst had printed and distributed a handbill in which he named Frank McLaury as specifically assisting with hiding the mules. He reprinted this in Tombstone Epiph, the newspaper, on July 30th of 1880. Virgil later said that McLaury had asked him if he had posted the handbills. When Virgil said he had not, McLaury said if Virgil had printed the handbills, it was Frank's intention to kill Virgil. He warned Virgil, if you ever again follow us as close as you did, then you will have a fight anyways. This incident was the first run-in between Clanton's, McLaury's, and the Earps. And then they robbed the stagecoach, the Cowboys did, and Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson in 1876 as lawmen in Dodge City, Kansas. Deputy U.S. Marshal Virgil Earp, along with temporary federal deputies Wyatt and Morgan Earp, Wells Fargo agent Marshall Williams, and former Kansas Sheriff Bat Masterson, who was dealing faro at the Oriental Saloon, and County Sheriff Behan set out to find the robbers. Well, Wells Fargo's issued a warrant poster offering 3,600 reward, equivalent to 120,000 in 2025 for the three robbers, 1,200 each, dead or alive. Robbery of a mall carrying stagecoach was both federal crime and territorial crime, and the posse consisted of both county and federal authorities and deputies. The posse trailed the robbers to a nearby ranch where they found a drifter named Luther King. He would not tell who his confederates were until Posse lied and told him that Doc Holliday's girlfriend had been shot. Fearful of Holliday's reputation, he confessed to holding the reins of the robbers' horses and identified Bill Leonard, Harry the Kid Head, and Jim Crane as the robbers. They were all known cowboys and rustlers. Behan and Williams escorted King back to Tombstone. Remarkably, King walked in the front door of the jail and a few minutes later walked out the back. King had arranged with Undersheriff Harry Woods to sell the horse he had been riding to John Dunbar, Sheriff Behan's partner in the Dexter livery stable. On March 19th, King conveniently escaped while Dunbar and Woods were making out the bill of sale. Woods claimed that someone had deliberately unlocked and secured back door to the jail. The Earps and the townspeople were furious at King's easy escape. Williams was later dismissed from Wells Fargo, leaving behind a number of debts when it was determined he had been stealing from the company for years. The Earps pursued the other two men for 17 days, riding for 60 hours without food and 36 hours without water, during which Bob Paul's horse died, and Wyatt Morgan's horses became so weak that the two men walked 18 miles back to Tombstone to obtain new horses. Pursuing the Cowboys for over 400 miles, they could not obtain more fresh horses and were forced to give up the chase. They returned to Tombstone on April 1st. Behan submitted a bill for $796.84, equivalent to $27,000 in 2025 to the county for posse expenses, but he refused to reimburse the Earps for any of their costs. Virgil was incensed. They were later reimbursed by Wells Fargo and Company, but the incident caused further friction between the county and federal law enforcement and between Behan and the Earps. After he was passed over by Johnny Behan for the position of undersheriff, Wyatt thought he might beat him in the next Cochise County election in 1882. He thought catching the murderers of Bud Hilflot and Peter Roig would help him win the sheriff's office. Wyatt later said that on June 2nd, 1881, he offered the Wells Fargo and Company reward money and more to Ike Clanton if he would provide information leading to the capture and deaths of the stage robbers. According to Wyatt, Ike was initially interested, but the plan was foiled when the three suspects, Leonard, Head, and Crane, were killed in an unrelated incident. Ike began to fear that word of his possible cooperation had leaked, threatening to compromise his standing among the Cowboys. Undercover Wells Fargo Company agent M. Williams suspected a deal and said that something to Ike, who was fearful that the other Cowboys might learn of his double cross. Ike now began to threaten Wyatt and Doc Holliday, who had learned of the deal, for apparently revealing Ike's willingness to arrest his friends. The fallout over the Cowboys attempted to implicate Holiday and the Earps in the robbery. Along with Behan's involvement in King's escape, was the beginning of an increasingly bad feelings between the Earp brothers and the Cowboy factions. Wyatt Earp and the Cochise County Sheriff, Johnny Behan, were interested in the same sheriff's position and also might have shared an interest in the same woman, Josephine Marcus, known as Sadie. Citizens of Tombstone believed that Behan and Sadie were married, but Behan was a known womanizer and had relations with prostitutes over and other women. In the early 1881, Sadie ended the relationship after she became home and found Behan in bed with the wife of a friend and kicked him out. Although she used the Behan surname, though the end of that summer, she rented a home sometime before April 1881 to Dr. George Goodfellow. Wyatt Earp lived in Mattie Blaylock, who was listed as his wife in 1880, which you remember her from Tombstone movie. She had a growing addiction to opiate Landum, which was a readily available at the time. Earp remained with Blaylock until he left Tombstone in April of 1882. There are no complimentary Tombstone records that indicate a relationship between Sadie and Earp, but Earp certainly knew her because both Behan and Earp had offices above Crystal Palace Saloon. Sadie, traveling either with Mrs. J.C. Earp or Mrs. Wyatt Earp, left for Los Angeles on March 21st of 1882 and then returned to her family, San Francisco in 1880. July of 1882, Wyatt left Colorado and went to San Francisco, where he sought out Sadie and his brother Virgil, who was seeking treatment for his arm. In February or March of 1883, Sadie and Earp left San Francisco for Gunson, where Earp ran a faro bank until he received a request in April for assistance from Luke Short in Dodge City. Sadie was his common law wife for the next 46 years. September stage hold up, tension between the Earps and McLaurys further increased when another passenger stage on the Sandy Bob line in Tombstone area bound for Bisbee was held up on September 8th of 1881. Masked bandits robbed all the passengers and their valuables. Since stage was not carrying a strong box during the robbery, the driver heard one of the robbers describe the money as sugar, a phrase known to be used by Frank Stillwell. Stillwell had until the prior month had been a deputy for Sheriff Behan, but had been fired for irregularities. Frank Stillwell, suspected of killing Morgan, murdered by the Earps. Tom McLaury, killed in the gunfight. Pete Spence is suspected of ambushing Virgil. Wyatt and Virgil Earp rode with a sheriff posse and tracked Bisbee stage robbers. Virgil had been appointed Tombstone's marshal on June 6th of 81 after Ben Sippy abandoned the job, which this is Stillwell right here, who was that sheriff that ended up becoming an outlaw. And then they arrested Stillwell and Spence. Frank Stillwell had just arrived in Bisbee with his livery stable partner Pete Spence, and the two were arrested by Deputy U.S. Marshal Virgil Earp for the holdup. Both were friends of Ike Clanton and McLaury. At the preliminary hearing, Stillwell and Spence were able to provide several witnesses who supported their alibis. Judge Spicer dropped the charges for insufficient evidence, just as he had done for Doc Holliday earlier in the year. Released on bail, Spence Stillwell were rearrested by Marshal Virgil Earp for the Bisbee robbery on a new federal charge of interfering with a mail carrier. The newspapers, however, reported that they had been arrested for different stage robberies that occurred on October 8th near Contention City. Like another cowboys believe the new arrest was further evidence that the Earps were illegally persecuting the cowboys. They told the Earps that they could either expect retaliation while Virgil and Wyatt were in Tuscan for the federal hearing on the charges against Spence and Stillwell. Frank Mallory confronted Morgan Earp. He told him that the McLaurys would kill the Earps if they tried to arrest Spence and Stillwell, or the McLaurys again. The Tombstone re- paper reported that since the arrests of Spence and Stillwell, vile threats are being made that friends of the accused will get the Earps. Cowboys accused Holiday of robbery. Milt Joyce and the county supervisor of owner of the Oriental Saloon had a continuous relationship with Doc Holliday. In October of 1880, Holliday had trouble with a gambler named Johnny Tyler. In Milt Joyce Oriental Saloon, Tyler had been hired by a competing gambling establishment to drive customers from Joyce's saloon. Holliday challenged Tyler to a fight, but Tyler ran. Joyce did not like Holliday or the Earps, and he continued to argue with Holliday. Joyce ordered Holliday to remove from the saloon, but would not return Holliday's revolver. A Holliday returned carrying a double action revolver. Milt brandished a pistol and threatened Holliday, but Holliday shot Joyce in the palm, disarming him, and then shot Joyce's business partner, William Parker, in the big toe. Joyce then hit Holliday over the head with his revolver. Holliday was arrested and pleaded guilty to assault and battery. Holliday and his on again, off again mistress, Big Nose Katie, had many fights. After a particularly nasty drunken argument, Holliday kicked her out. County Sheriff John Behan and Milt Joyce saw an opportunity to exploit the situation. They plied Big Nose Katie with more booze and suggested to her a way to get even with Holliday. She signed an affidavit implicating Holliday in the attempted stagecoach robbery and murders. Holliday was a good friend of Bill Leonard, a former watchmaker from New York, and one of the three men implicated in the robbery. Judge Will Spicers issued a arrest warrant for Holliday. The Earps found witnesses who could attest to Holliday's location at the time of the murders, and Kate sobered up, revealing that Behan Joyce had influenced her to sign a document she did not understand. With the cowboy plot revealed, Spicer freed Holliday. The district attorney threw out the charges, labeling ridiculous. Doc gave Kate some money and put her on the stage out of town. Like Clanton's conflict with Doc Holliday, Wyatt Earp testified after the gunfight that 5 or 6 weeks prior he had met Ike Clanton outside the Alhambra Hotel. Ike told Wyatt that Doc Holliday had told him he knew of Ike's meetings with Wyatt and about Ike providing information on Head, Leonard, and Crane, as well as their attempted robbery of the stage. Ike now accused Earp of telling Holliday about these conversations. Earp testified that he told Ike he had not told Holliday anything. Wyatt Earp offered to prove this when Holliday and Ike Clanton's next returned to town. A month later, the weekend before the shootout, Morgan Earp was concerned about possible trouble with the Cowboys. He asked Doc Holliday to come back to Tombstone from Fiesta celebration in Tuscan, where Holliday had been gambling. On his return, Wyatt Earp asked Holliday about Ike's accusation. The morning of Tuesday, October 25th of 1881, the day before the gunfight, Ike Clanton and Tom McLaury drove 10 miles in a spring wagon from Chandler's Milk Ranch at the foot of Dragoon Mountains, Tombstone. They were in town to sell a large number of beef stock, most of them owned by McLaurys. Fred Dodge, an undercover detective for Wells Fargo, heard from J.B. Ayers, another undercover Wells Fargo man, in contention that Frank McLaury, Billy Clanton, and Billy Claiborne were in town and planning to join Ike and Tom in Tombstone Wednesday afternoon. Dodge, who had been sick, got up and went looking for the city marshal, Virgil Earp. He found Tombstone Deputy City Marshal Morgan Earp at the Alhambra Saloon instead and told him the news. Near midnight, Holliday saw Clanton in the Alhambra Saloon and confronted him. Accusing him of lying about their previous conversations, they got into a heated argument. Wyatt Earp, who was not wearing a badge, encouraged his brother Morgan to intervene. Morgan took Holliday out onto the street, and Ike, who had been drinking, steadily followed them. City Marshal Virgil Earp arrived a few minutes later and threatened to arrest both Holliday and Clanton if they did not stop squabbling. Wyatt Earp walked over to the Oriental Saloon, and Ike followed him. They talked again, and Ike threatened to confront Holliday in the morning. Ike told Earp that the fighting talk had been going on for a long time, and he intended to put an end to it. Ike told Earp, "I will be ready for you in the morning." Wyatt told Ike to go home because there was no money in it. Ike sat down near Wyatt, his revolver in plain sight, and told Earp, "You must not think I won't be after you all in the morning." Virgil Earp went to the Occidental Saloon across the street. Morning of the gunfights, events leading up to the Ike Clanton court hearing. The OK Corral after the gunfire in 1882. After Holliday's confrontation with Ike Clanton, Wyatt Earp took Holliday back to his room at the Camellia Sidney Buckfly's lodging house to sleep off his drinking. Then went home and to bed. Tombstone Marshal Virgil Earp played poker with Ike Clanton, Tom McLaury, Cochise County Sheriff Johnny Behan, and fifth unnamed man in the back room of the Occidental Saloon until morning. About dawn on October 26th, the card game broke up and Behan and Virgil Earp went home to bed. Ike Clanton testified later that he saw Virgil take his six-shooter out of his lap and stick it in his pants when the game ended. Not having rented a room, Tom McLaury and Ike Clanton had no place to go. Shortly after 8 a.m., barkeeper Boyle spoke to Ike Clanton in front of the telegraph office. Clanton had been drinking all night, and Boyle encouraged him to get some sleep, but Ike insisted he would not go to bed. Boyle later testified he noticed Ike was armed, covered his gun for him. Boyle later said that Ike told him as soon as the Earps and Doc Holliday showed themselves on the street, the ball would open and they would have to fight. I went down to Wyatt Earp's house and told him that Ike Clanton had threatened that when Wyatt, his brothers, and Doc Holliday showed themselves on the street, that the ball would open. Ike said in his testimony afterwards that he remembered neither meeting Boyle or making any such statements that day. Deputy Marshal Andy Frank also heard the talk around town. He woke Virgil, who listened and went back to sleep. Ike's continuous threats were not worth losing sleep over. Later in the morning, Ike picked up his revolver from the West End Corral where he had deposited his weapons and stabled his wagon and team after entering town. By noon that day, Ike was still drinking, once again armed in violation of the city ordinance against carrying firearms in the city. He told anyone who would listen he was looking for Holliday or an Earp. At Fly's boarding house, where Holliday and his common-law wife, Mary Catherine Honoree, were sleeping, proprietor Mary Fly heard Clanton's threats and banged on Holliday's door. Fly told Harney Ike Clanton was here looking for Holliday, and he had a rifle with him. Harney woke up Holliday and relayed the threat, who replied, "If God will let me live to get my clothes on, he will see me." About 1 p.m., Marshal Virgil and his deputy Morganer found Ike on 4th Street, still armed. Virgil pistol whipped him from behind. Disarming him, the Earps took Ike to appear before Justice of the Peace A.O. Wallace for violating ordinance. Wyatt waited with Ike while Virgil went in to to find Justice Wallace so a court hearing could be held. Like Clanton court hearing, Morgan Earp later murdered by the Cowboys. Wyatt Earp waited for Virgil to return with Justice Wallace. Witnesses overheard Wyatt tell Ike, "You cattle thieving son of a bitch, and you know that I know you are a cattle thieving son of a bitch. You've threatened my life enough, and you've got to fight." Ike Clanton was heard to reply, "Fight is in my racket, and all I want is 4 feet on the ground. 4 feet of ground." Ike reported in his testimony afterwards that Wyatt Earp cursed him. He said Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan offered him his rifle and to fight him right there in the courthouse, which Ike declined. Ike also denied ever threatening the Earps. Justice Wallace fined Ike $25, which is equivalent to $830 in 2025 plus court costs. Ike paid the fine. Virgil told Ike he could pick up his confiscated rifle, revolver at the Grand Hotel, which was favored by cowboys when in town. Ike testified that he picked up his weapons from William Soule, the jailer, a couple days later. And that led up to the fight for the near the OK Corral there with that. That's a little history on that. Hey, cousin Lisa, welcome in. We're talking about Tombstone, Arizona tonight, and Wyatt Earp and all that. We're gonna get into the mysteries of Johnny Ringo. And many of you know Johnny Ringo was the leader of all that gang of misfits there. He was Johnny Peters Ringo was born May 3rd of 1850, and he died July 13th of 1882. He was American Old West outlaw loosely associated with the Cochise County Cowboys and frontier boomtown Tombstone, Arizona territory. He took part in the Mason County War, Texas, during which he committed his first murder. He was arrested and charged with murder. He was affiliated with Cochise County Sheriff Johnny Behan, Ike Clanton, Frank Stillwell. During 1881 and 1882, he got into the confrontation in Tombstone with Doc Holliday and was suspected by Wyatt Earp of taking part in the attempted murder of Virgil Earp and the ambush and death of Morgan Earp. Ringo was found dead with a bullet to his temple, which was ruled a suicide. Modern writers have advanced theories attributing to his death to Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Frank Leslie, or Michael O'Rourke, which you seen in Tombstone, where Doc Holliday beats Wyatt Earp to meet Johnny Ringo, and later they get in their gunfight, and in early life of Johnny Ringo, he was the son of Martin Mary Peters Ringo, distant Dutch ancestry, and was born in what was later became the small town of Greens Fork, Clay County Township, Wayne County, Indiana. His family moved to Liberty, Missouri. In 1856, he was a tangentially related cousin to the Younger brothers. So he's got ties to the Jesse and Younger gang. So he's related to Cole Younger. Cousin to the Younger brothers through his aunt, Augusta Peters Inskip, who married Coleman P. Younger, the uncle of the Outlaws. In 1858, his family moved from Liberty to Gallatin, which all these are not too far from me. Gallatin's not too far from me, where they rented property from the father of John W. Sheets, who became the first official victim of the James Younger gang when they robbed the Daviess County Savings and Loan Association. I never knew this about Johnny Ringo. In 1869, on July 30th of 1864, when Johnny was 14, his family was in Wyoming En route to California, his father, Martin Ringo, was killed when he stepped off their wagon holding a shotgun, which accidentally discharged. Family buried Martin on a hillside along the trail. Mason County War trouble started when two American wrestlers, Elijah and Peter Bacchus, were dragged from the Mason jail and lynched by a predominantly German mob. Full-blown war began May 13th of 1875 when Tim Williamson was arrested by a hostile posse and murdered by a German farmer named Peter Badman Batter Cooley, and his friends, including Johnny Ringo, conducted a terror campaign against their rivals. Officials called it the Mason County War. Locally, it was called the Hoodoo War. Cooley retaliated by killing local German ex-deputy sheriff John Worley and taking his scalp and tossing his body down a well on August 10th of 1875. Cooley already had a reputation with a dangerous man and was respected as a Texas Ranger. He killed several others during the war. After Cooley supporter Moses Beard was killed, Ringo murdered James Cheney on September 25th of 1875 with a friend named Bill Williams. They rode up to Cheney's house. Cheney, who had led Baird into the ambush, unarmed, greeted them unarmed, invited him in, and began washing his face with on the porch. Both Ringo and Williams shot and killed him. The two then rode to the house of Dave Duell and called him outside, but when he came out with a gun, they fled back into town. Sometime later, Scott Cooley and Johnny Ringo mistook Charlie Barter for his brother Pete and killed him. Both men were jailed in Barnett, Texas by Sheriff A.J. Strickland. But Ringo and Cooley soon broke out of jail with the help of their friends, and they parted company and evaded the law. The Mason County War ended about November 1876. After about a dozen individuals had been killed, Scott Cooley was thought to be dead, and Johnny Ringo and his friend George Glidden were in jail. One of Ringo's alleged cellmates was the notorious killer John Wesley Hardin. While Glidden was sentenced to 99 years, Ringo appears to have been acquitted. 2 years later, Ringo was a constable in Loyal Valley, Texas. Soon after this, he traveled to Arizona. In his life in Tombstone, Ringo first appeared in Cochise County Territory in 1879 with Joseph Graves Olaney, alias Joe Hill, a friend from the Mason County War. In December of 1879, a drunk Ringo shot unarmed Lewis Hancock in Safford, Arizona saloon when Hancock refused a complimentary drink of whiskey, stating that he preferred beer. Hancock survived his wounds. Soon after arriving in Tombstone, Arizona, he met editor Sam Purdy of the Tombstone Epitaph, who later writes of their talk. He said that he was as certain of being killed as he was living then. He said that he might run along for a couple of years more and may not last 2 days. In Tombstone, Ringo developed a reputation of having a bad temper. He may have participated in robberies and killings with the Cochise County Cowboys, a loosely associated group of outlaws. He was occasionally and erroneously referred to as Ringgold by the local newspapers. He described himself as a specular in 1882 Cochise County Great Register. His confrontation with Doc Holliday on January 17th of 1882, Ringo and Doc Holliday traded threats and seemed headed for a gunfight. Both men were arrested by Tombstone's chief of police, James Flynn, and hauled before a judge and carrying weapons in town. Both were fined. Judge Williams H. Stillwell followed up on the charges outstanding against Ringo for robbery in Fayetteville, and Ringo was rearrested and jailed on January 20th for the weekend. Ringo was suspected by the Earps of taking part in the December 28th of 1881 ambush of Virgil Earp that crippled him for life, and in March 18th of 1882, murder of Morgan Earp while he was shooting pool in the Tombstone Saloon. Deputy U.S. Marshal Wyatt Earp and his posse killed Frank Stillwell in Tuscan on March 20th, 1882. After the shooting, the Earps and a federal posse set out on a vendetta to find and kill the others that had responsible for ambushing Virgil and Morgan. Cochise County Sheriff Johnny Behan received warrants from a Tuscan judge for the arrest of the Earps and Holiday. He deputized Ringo and 19 other men, many of them friends of Stillwell and the Cochise County Cowboys. During the Earps vendetta ride, Wyatt Earp killed one of Ringo's closest friends, Curly Bill Brocious, in a gunfight at Ironclad Springs, later Mesical Springs, about 20 miles from Tombstone. Which you remember that when Kurt Russell's character playing Wyatt walked across that creek, just shooting them all. Earp told his biographer Stuart Lake that the man named Florentino Cruz confessed to being the lookout of Morgan's murder and identified Ringo Stillwell, Swellings, and Brocious as Morgan's killers. The local posse pursued and came close to the federal posse at Henry C. Hooker's ranch, but never faced the Earp lawmen. Former Pima County Sheriff Bob Paul, who had been in Tombstone at the time and volunteered to ride with the Benham posse, wrote a letter to Tuscan citizens on March 3rd of 1898 in response to the earlier story that said full of errors. He said the Earps posse had told Hooker to tell Behan and his posse where they were camped. Hooker told Behan where the Earps were camped, but the posse left in the opposite direction. Death, memorial plaque and grave of Johnny Ringo on private property. During the Tombstone's 4th of July festivities, Ringo drank heavily. He left town 2 days later, taking several bottles of liquor for the ride. Deputy Bill Breckenridge saw him 2 days later near Dials Ranch in South Pass of the Dragoon Mountains. He later wrote that Ringo was very drunk, reeling in the saddle. He encouraged Ringo to follow him back to the Goodrich Ranch, but he was drunk and stubborn and went on his way. I think this was the last time he was seen alive. About 3 p.m. on July 13th, ranch hands at nearby ranch heard a shot. Suicide. Teamster James Yost was hauling wood and found Ringo's body on July 14th, seated in a bunch of 5 large blackjack oaks growing up in semicircle of one root, and in the center of them was a large flat rock made a comfortable seat. He was not more than 700 feet from Smith's house in West Turkey Creek Valley near Chiricahua Peak in Arizona Territory. His body had already turned black from the desert heat. His feet were wrapped in strips of cloth torn from his undershirt. Ringo had lost his horse with his boots tied to the saddle. The coroner's report noted that he had eventually traveled but a short distance in his footgear. There was a bullet hole in his right temple and an exit wound in the back of his head. The fatal wound was upward at a 45-degree angle between the right eye and the ear. His revolver was still in his right hand. According to the coroner's report, Ringo's Colt single-action Army 45 revolver held 5 cartridges. A knife cut was found at the base of his scalp as if someone had cut it with a knife. His horse was found 11 days later about 2 miles away with Ringo's boots still tied to the saddle. The coroner's inquest officially ruled his death a suicide. Ringo's body is buried near the base of the tree where it was discovered. The grave is located on private land. A gate on a nearby road permits visitors to view the site. Despite the coroner's ruling and contemporaneous newspaper reports that Ringo had frequently threatened to commit suicide and that the event was expected at the time, alternative theories of doubtful plausibility about Ringo's death have been proposed over the years. Some assert that the lack of powder burns on his head suggests that he was shot from a distance. Coroner's jury report does not mention the presence or absence of powder burns. Furthermore, Ringo's body was already turning black due to decomposition. Robert Boiler, a member of the coroner's jury, wrote in 1934, I showed James Yost where the bullet had entered the tree on the left side. Blood and brains were oozing from the wound and matted his hair. There was an empty shell in the six shooter, and the hammer was on that. I called it a suicide 52 years ago. I'm still calling it a suicide. I guess I'm the last of the coroner's jury. According to the book, I Married Wyatt Earp, which author and collector Glenn Boyer claimed that have assembled from manuscripts written by Earp's fourth wife, Josephine Marcus Earp. Earp and Doc Holliday returned to Arizona with some friends in early July and found Ringo camped in West Turkey Creek Valley. As Ringo attempted to flee up the canyon, Earp shot him with a rifle. Boyer refused to produce his source manuscripts, and by 1880, critics were skeptical of the book claims. 2006, New York Times contributor Alan Barra wrote, I Married Wyatt Earp is now recognized by Earp's researchers as a hoax. Tombstone historian Ben T. Terrix thought the story about Earp's involvement was credible, reasoning that only Earp had sufficient motive to kill Ringo. He was probably in the area at the time, and near the end of his life, Earp told one historian in circumstantial detail how he killed John Ringo. Earp was interviewed in 1888 by agent of California historian Herbert Bancroft in 1932. Frank Lockwood, who authored Pioneer Days in Arizona, wrote that Earp told both of them that he killed Ringo as he left Arizona in March of 1882, almost 4 months before Ringo died. He included other details that do not match what is known about Ringo's death. Earp repeated his story to at least three other people. In an interview with a reporter in Denver in 1896, Earp denied that he had killed Ringo, but later privately claimed once again that he had. Now, the Doc Holliday story, which you see in the movie Tombstone, the Doc Holliday theory is similar to the Earp theory, except that Holliday is alleged to have killed Ringo. A variant popularized in the movie Tombstone asserts that Holliday stepped in for Earp in response to a gunfight challenge from Ringo and shot him. Records of Pueblo County, Colorado District Court indicate that Holliday and his attorney appeared in court on July 11th and 14th and 18th of 1882 to answer charges of larceny. However, the writ of capias was issued for him on the 11th, suggesting that he did not, in fact, appear in court on that day. Ringo's body was found on the 14th, 6 days before Ringo's death. Pueblo Daily Sheriff's reported that Holliday was in Salida, Colorado, about 670 miles from Turkey Creek, Arizona, and then in Leadville, about 700 miles distant, on July 18th. There was still an arrest warrant outstanding on Holliday in Arizona for his part in Frank Stillwell's murder, making it unlikely that he would have entered Arizona at that time. And then we have the Michael O'Rourke theory. Some accusations attribute Ringo's death to Michael O'Rourke, an Harrington gambler who was arrested in Tucson in January of 1881 on suspicion of murdering a mining engineer named Henry Schneider. Wyatt Earp is said to have protected him from being lynched by a mob organized and led by Ringo. O'Rourke escaped from jail in April of 1881 and never stood trial on the murder charges. The last documented sighting of O'Rourke was in Dragoon Mountains near Tombstone during May of 1881, a well-mounted and equipped, and presumably on his way out of the territory. From then on, he is referred to only as the unsubstantiated rumors and legends. According to one a combination of the debt owed Earp and the grudge he held against Ringo prompted him to return to Arizona in 1882, track Ringo down and kill him. While some sources consider the story plausible, others point out that O'Rourke, like Holliday, would have been reluctant to re enter Arizona with a murder warrant hanging over his head, particularly to commit another murder. And the last claim, the Frank Leslie claim, while in Yuma Territorial Prison for killing his wife, Buckskin Frank Leslie reported confessed to a guard that he had killed Ringo. Few believed his story, and some thought he was simply claiming credit for to curry favor with Earp's inner circle or for whatever notary it might bring him. So that is a little bit on Johnny Ringo. Catch up with the chat here before we move on to our next one. Hey, Granzer. Hey, Russell. Oh, wow, you're covering Tombstone. What a popular spot for researchers. I have not followed this location close enough. Yeah, we're covering the history of it, and we're going to dive into the hauntings. I saved the hauntings for last. I dived in the history of Wyatt Earp, Morgan Earp, the shootout, the Cowboys, Doc Holliday, Ringo, which is Johnny Ringo up on the screen now, which I learned something new tonight too, that Johnny Ringo, is a cousin of the Younger, of Cole Younger that rode with Jesse James. And that Johnny Ringo lived here in Missouri, not too far from where I live, which I never knew that. I once caught a paranormal research team, two to four women. They were out staying the night there. Just remember they had gotten some pushback when some of in the chat who said they were researchers said that the women were treating the research as a college girls' getaway, which to be honest, they did come off that way. Now that they Now what they did find, I can't recall if they found anything. So it was one of those cases where they did live stream, and it seemed this was not their first research, but maybe because of their nature, seemed a lot of goofing off was happening. And that's the thing. If you're in a place like that that's rich in history, don't goof off. Investigate it. Experience the stuff. Don't goof sit there and goof off while you're doing it. They had to be geez, maybe had to be 2019 or 20, maybe even 22. It was a while back, but I found it total accident. I have not deep dived into what has been recorded here. I went there as a kid when my parents would take us kids on a road trip. Vaguely remember it. Yeah, Granzer, if I ever get to go out there to investigate, we go to Tombstone, I'll reach out to you. You can come along with us. I just always found Arizona history super boring, dry, dusty, thirsty, not much going on. Had the intent, had the internet dropped there for a minute, so a little behind. Got the Century Link coming out this Wednesday. Question: have you deep dived into Tombstone? What have you gathered from your research? Something powerful there or no? You Would you research that location? Yeah, I would definitely research that location. I mean, not just the miners. I mean, miners are probably haunting that town as well because of even though they don't have records of any miners dying, a lot of miners die in those mines back there. I mean, so there could be miners' spirits there too as well. Well, Russ, I remember what some were saying about those four women research team because their nature, I guess some said they were a bunch of amateurs. Will end up getting something attached to them from a location. And yep, exactly. Maybe we should play. Yeah, right. Can't recall how long those women have been ghost researching. One of them, there are so many out there. Yeah, oh yeah. And I know, like I said earlier, they still give reenactments out there of the OK Corral fights. Before we get into the hauntings, we'll recap. This guy here, Pete Spence, was one of the ones suspected of killing Morgan Earp. Johnny Ringo was the other one suspected of it. And then you had Stillwell, who was also part of them Cowboys and Crooked Lawman. And they're also suspected of Virgil Earp ambushing him. And then you have the old coward Ike Clanton, and then old Doc Holliday, which was known as a quick draw. I want to say, if memory serves me, that there was something really powerful there besides the past residuals who died there. Well, I mean, you figure that town has seen its share of violence with all the shootings from the cowboys and the murders and stuff going on in that town. I mean, it's no telling. There's a lot of negative energy that was built in that town as well with all them shootings. And then they kick up energy when they're doing those reenactments out there too as well. So, and then Ed Schifflin, who's the founder of Tombstone and was also one of the miners out there that owned several of the mining claims. So we're gonna got about 10 minutes left. We're gonna dive into the hauntings of Tombstone. This was an article like I found that somebody had wrote. Um, Somebody by the name of Kathy Alexander in 2007. Streets of Tombstone themselves are said to be the pathways of many lingering spirits, one of which is the long dead Marshal Fred White. He was accidentally shot by cowboy faction leader Curly Bill. White, the first marshal of Tombstone, had gained the respect of the Clanton gang and, in fact, had arrested cowboy members on several occasions, rarely having any problems when doing so. The early morning of October 28th, 1880, Curly Bill and several of his cohorts were making sport by shooting up the town. When White went out to disarm the gunman, a shot was accidentally fired, hitting White in the groin. Though it was thought that he would make a full recovery, 2 days later he died. Today he is said to haunt the street in front of the shooting site, which was an empty lot where the Birdcage Theater was built a year later. Another ghostly cowboy of of a man move another ghostly cowboy, that of a man moving along in a long black frock coat, has also been seen on several occasions crossing the road. Yet the apparition is often seen near the site where Virgil Earp was ambushed and shot in the arm, crippling him for life. Spirit never crosses the street, leading many to believe it may be the ghost of Virgil Earp himself. A woman in a long white dress has also been spied on in Tombstone streets. One legend tells that she is the fretful mother whose child died from yellow fever in the 1880s and was devastated. She later took her own life. Another version of this tale claims that she was a madam who was hanged and continues to stalk the streets searching for her executioners. Lawlessness, though, was not the only cause of numerous deaths during Tombstone's heydays. Twice it suffered terrible fires, the first in June of 1881 and the second of 1882 during these two infernos, which both wiped out significant business district areas. More than 40 men lost their lives in the crowded saloons and brothels that burned to the ground. These long dead, suffering men are also said to make themselves known, appearing to complete with drastic burns. Others have reported the smell of smoke and burning materials when there is no explainable reason. The OK Corral, Tombstone's most famous place, the OK Corral, was the site of the best known gunfight in the Old West, portrayed in dozens of Western films and books. The gunfight made Wyatt Earp a legend and brought Tombstone, Arizona fame. After tensions have been building between the Earps and the cowboy faction in Tombstone for some time, Marshal Virgil Earp, determined to disarm the men on October 26th of 1881, resulted in the 30-second shootout, which left Frank and Tom McClary, as well as Billy Clanton, dead. Also involved in the gunfight for the Cowboys were Ike Clanton, Billy Claiborne, and Wes Fuller. In the Earp party were brothers Virgil, Wyatt, Morgan, as well as Doc Holliday. Today, the OK Corral is allegedly haunted by the ghosts of the Cowboys. Several witnesses have reported seeing the faded apparitions of men in cowboy attire, often with guns drawn, perhaps locked in perpetual battle with the Earps. Others have reported numerous cold spots in various areas of the corral. The OK Corral is at 308 East Allen Street. Boot Hill Graveyard where the cowboys that were killed in Tombstone were buried. The Boot Hill Graveyard is a tourist attraction today. However, it's a real cemetery and there is no admission fee, and respect should be shown to the dead. At the nearby Boot Hill Graveyard, so named because many of its occupants died with their boots on, more than 250 graves tell partial stories of Tombstone lawless past. Used primarily from 1878 to 1874, the graveyard was originally called the Tombstone Cemetery. Men such as those killed at the OK Corral gunfight, Marshal Fred White, killed by Curly Bill Brocious, and an unfortunate soul by the name of George Johnson, who was hanged by mistake. 5 men hanged for vicious killings labeled as Bisbee Massacre. Gunfighter Charlie Storms, who Luke Short killed, and dozens more ranging from prospectors to outlaws, lawmen, and prostitutes, of some who were laid to rest here. Their names were never known or were only known by a nickname. Over the years, Old Cemetery fell in despair, with numerous wooden tombstones either failing, falling, or decomposing, and others stolen by souvenir hunters. It wasn't until the town's first El Dorado days in around 1929 that the old cemetery began to be called the Boot Hill Graveyard. Still, it remained neglected until 1940s when efforts began to restore it. Today, it is one of the Tombstone's most popular tourist attractions. Evidently, according to several legends, it remains popular with the many dead who lie there. Visitors often report seeing strange lights and hearing identifiable noises coming from the old graveyard. Spirits have been spied on numerous occasions and are often more frequently said to appear in photographs. Billy Clanton, killed in the gunfight at OK Corral, is said to arise from his grave before walking along the road back to Tombstone. Boot Hill Graveyard is just north of Tombstone on Highway 80. Though John Heath was lynched in Tombstone for masterminding the Bisbee Massacre, evidence shows that he was not actually buried at Boot Hill. As this marker indicates, Bisbee Massacre grave, then the Birdcage Theater, one of the oldest original buildings in Tombstone and one of the most authentic attractions in this once booming mining camp. The Birdcage Theater also has a reputation as the most haunted place in town, allegedly hosting as many as 31 ghosts. The birdcage was named after its 14 small cribs hanging from the ceiling that once housed painted ladies dressed as finely feathered birds. After its opening in 1881, it quickly gained a reputation as the wildest place in town, so much that even the faraway New York Times said the Birdcage Theater is the wildest, wickedest night spot between Basin Street and Barbary Coast. Between 1881 and 1889, the Birdcage never closed its doors 24 hours a day, as it provided gambling, drinking, and other vices its many cus- to its many customers. The saloon was the scene of 26 deaths, which can be attested by the 140 bullet holes, which can still be viewed at the Birdcage today. Since 1934, the old building has served as a museum owned and operated by the Hunley family. It still houses the gilded cages, hand-painted stage, and the original grand piano. Here where tourists can walk along the floors of this historic honky-tonk once like like the likes of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. Seemingly, some of the old legends continue to stalk the old saloon as both staff and guests have reported seeing ghostly apparitions. 1880s clothing, most often seen in the figure, is the figure of a male stagehand wearing black striped pants, a visor, and a clipboard as he walks across the stage. Other occurrences include rescuous laughter, music pouring from the old theater doors at night. Others report hearing a faint sound of women singing, and the museum sound system is inexplicably turned on of its own accord, blaring old time music. Others have reported strange sounds from the main floor balconies and the sharp sense of cigar smoke, whiskey after closing time. Staff have reported hearing clicking glass and shuffling cars. The hauntings reports date back to 1921 when a school was built across the street and the students began hearing laughter and music from the abandoned building as well as the smell of cigar smoke. Over the years, the Hunley family staff and visitors alike have experienced several strange events. One of the fascinating tales is how a dice table allegedly weighs several hundred pounds mysteriously moved the night before. When staff arrived the next morning, the table had been moved in front of the door with a sign that read, "Do not disturb our 26 resident ghosts." The table is so heavy that it reportedly took 8 men to move it back into its former position. Another story tells a statue of Wyatt Earp that was made and placed in one of the cribs overlooking the theater. When it was first placed there, staff would arrive in the morning to find Wyatt's hat continuously knocked off and thrown onto the floor below. This occurred repeatedly about 6 months. On one occasion, staff arrived to find the statue was turned around with its back facing the view from below. Sometime later, a local historian told the Hunleys that they had placed the Wyatt Earp statue in the crib that the Clantons usually reserve. When the statue was moved to the crib Wyatt actually frequented while he was alive, the hat tossing finally stopped. Another occasion, a valuable antique poker chip, which had been missing for years, suddenly reappeared on the poker table. Upon finding it there, it was locked away in a safe until historians could authenticate it. However, when the historians arrived, they were disappointed to find that the chip had suddenly gone missing again. Only after they left did it reappear in a locked desk drawer. Black Maria hearse carried those killed at the OK Corral to Boot Hill. It was the first vehicle to ever have curved glass, is trimmed out with gold, and is reportedly near $2 million. The faro table that Doc Holliday dealt cards on continues to stand in the Birdcage Theater. Birdcage Theater has been the site of several paranormal investigations featured on popular television programs. Birdcage Theater is located on 517 East Allen Street. Nellie Cashman's restaurant is another haunted location with spirits allegedly visiting this old building since frontier days. Located in Nellie Cashman's old restaurant, the boarding house, once called the Russ House, today's quaint little restaurant is said to continue to host a spirit or two. Original owner Nellie Cashman was one of the Old West's earliest female entrepreneurs and prospectors of an angel of mercy known throughout the West for her charity and courage and determination. After traveling to mining camps in Nevada and Canada, Cashman made her way to Tombstone in 1880, where she opened the Russ House. Soon, she moved onto another mining camp, onto other mining camps, but not until she made her mark on Tombstone. Though most do not believe that the building's original owner continues to lurk within its walls, they do believe there is someone. Both staff and customers made several reports of playful spirits who continue to make their presence known. Often staff will arrive in the morning, find objects have been moved overnight, strange noises, crashing sounds, and even muted voices that have been heard in the building. Lights mysteriously turn on and off on their own accord. Sudden temperature changes are felt in various areas. Though these spirits are seemingly harmless, they seem sensitive to criticism and making themselves known when people express disbelief. In fact, on one occasion when the customer was making fun of the ghost, a mustard bottle suddenly jumped from the table, le- leaving her clothing spattered with yellow gook. Yet others have actually professed of having seen an apparition of a woman, most presumed that it is Nellie herself. However, ghost investigators doubt this, as Nellie actually died in Canada many years after leaving Tombstone. Later, after Nellie had moved on, the building was used as a boarding house, and allegedly a woman who lived there was murdered by a man who was also living there. The investigators believe this woman continues to lurk in the building. The restaurant is located at 117 South 5th Street. The Bufford House, at the historic Bufford House in 1880, adobe home, which now serves as a bed and breakfast, the ghost of a man named George Bufford apparently refuses to leave. In the late 19th century, George, a gold prospector, lived in the house with his father when he fell in love with the girl across the street, Cleopatra, more familiar known as Petra. After returning from a long prospecting trip, George accompanied Petra and some other friends on an outing. For some reason, the girl decided to walk home with another man. George, sure that he had lost his promised girl, became angry, despondent, and reclusive. Soon, when Petra visited him, he shot her twice and turned the gun on himself. Despite her wounds, Petra recovered, but George died of a self inflicted gunshot. Like others, he died a tragic death. George continues to walk the earth, apparently lost in space and time, but the owners and guests have seen him walking inside the home and along the street in front of the old adobe structure. Often the doorbell rings in the middle of the night, seemingly of its own accord. Others have reported hearing knocking on walls, faucets turning themselves on and off, and strange lightings appearing once in a while. A woman report feeling someone touch their hair or stroke the back of their neck when no one is around. The Bufford House is at 113 East Stratford Street. And then Schifflin Hall, a building constructed in 1881 to bring culture to Tombstone. More ghosts are thought to remain here, built by Al Schifflin, brother to Tombstone's founder Ed Schifflin. The hall has envisioned the first class opera house, offering culture to Tombstone citizens for the first time, and that it did next to several decades, offering a theater alternative to the Descendant Birdcage Theater, where the proper people of Tombstone wouldn't be seen. Hall opened in June of 1881. Grand Applause, the largest, most imposing building in Tombstone and the largest adobe building anywhere in the Southwest. Attracting theater troops as far away as New York, Tombstone's finest enjoyed production balls, boxing matches, lectures, and more. According to the contemporary news accounts, it soon gained a reputation as the most noted theater between San Antonio and San Francisco. However, when Tombstone suffered, so did Shefflin Hall. By the early 1900s, the hall was showing the new moving pictures and a few scattered productions, but Tombstone's hair days were over, and for the next half century, the hall would be used only by the Masonic Lodge as it gradually fell into disrepair with the rest of the once booming town. Finally restored today, it continues to host several spirits. In fact, some say it is one of the most haunted yet overlooked buildings in Tombstone. On several occasions, people have heard what sounds like chains or spurs rattling inside the building. In fact, during one ghost tour, an entire group heard the sound. Several others strange sounds have also been heard in the building, especially during Tombstone City Council meetings that regularly take place there. One wonders whether they protest because of those meetings are so heated that one might think they have reverted to the 19th century. And then Big Nose Katie Saloon, popular saloon of today, first got its start in the Grand Hotel. September 1980, declared one of the finest hotels in the state. Hotel was luxury furnished with thick carpeting and walls armed with costly oil paintings, providing 16 bedrooms, each with a view. They were fitted with solid walnut furnishing toilet stands, fine fixtures, and wallpaper. The lobby was equipped with three elegant chandeliers and more luxurious furnishings. At the same time, the kitchen boasted hot, cold running water facilities that could serve some 500 people in a couple of hours. The hotel opened with an invitation-only ball on September 9th of 1880. During its first few years, the hotel often housed some Tombstone's most famous residents, including Wyatt, Virgil Earp, Doc Holliday, and the Clanton gang when they came into town. In fact, Ike Clanton and the two McLaury brothers were registered guests the night before the famous OK Corral gunfight. Another interesting character who lived at the hotel during this heyday was a man called Swamper, a janitor and odd job man at the hotel. The Swamper was regarded as an honest employee and was given. Sorry about that. My mic went muted for some reason. Swamper, he was a janitor and odd job man at the hotel. Swamper was regarded as an honest employee given accommodation, part of his pay. His bedroom, located in a dark corner of the basement, not only serves as a retreat from hotel's many customers, but also his own private mine shaft. The basement, located deep below Tombstone Street, was not too far from the many mine shafts that ran beneath the town. Swamper painstakingly spent his off hours tunneling an entrance from his bedroom to the nearby mine shafts. For some time, when his tunnel was complete, he could access a thick vein of silver where he began moonlight as a miner, taking from the vein silver nugget after silver nugget. What he did after hoarding his silver is unknown, but many believe it may still be hidden somewhere beneath Big Kate's saloon. Last, the Grand Hotel's luxury life was short lived, as she did not survive the devastating fire of May 25 of 1882 above ground. The only thing that remained standing were her seven graceful arches. and her floor joists on the main level. The rest of the building collapsed into the basement. Today, the building is home of Big Nose Katie Saloon. Several changes have been made to the original structure since it burned down and was rebuilt. The bar area, which was originally housed in old hotel's basement, is now located on the main level. In the basement is the gift shop, but the tunnel leading to the mine shaft still exists. The saloon holds the Grand Hotel's original long survived the two infernos is the Birdcage Theater and now a museum. Imagine setting your elbows down on every place that once did the Earps, Doc Holliday, and the Clantons. Today, not only does the historic saloon continue to be popular with its new patrons, but it's also said to remain the home to a couple of spectral patrons. Naturally, the most evident is that of the swamper, who is allegedly has never left the building. Staff, locals, and tourists have experienced this old miner, ranging from photos of him appearing to several fleeting appearances as he roamed the hills, the halls, the stairways, and especially the basement. Part of the legend claims that the swamper hid his silver somewhere in the building and returned to protect it. Other appearances have been made by fleeting cowboy spirits seen at the bar, standing in doorways, and by one account, knocking over beer cases in the basement. Perhaps this is one of our old friends, the Earps or Holiday. Other witnesses have claimed to have heard phantom people singing and talking in deserted rooms, reported that things fall onto the floor, on their table, on their own, doors opening and close, and unseen hands, lights turn on and off by themselves, and silverware have been known to fly off tables. Mannequins on the false balcony appear to have been moved, sometimes even tossed from it. The sounds of footsteps and muted voices are often heard coming from the basement when no one is down there. Areas in the saloon also experience extreme cold spots. Photographers have reported numerous strange, hazy forms appearing in images along the frequent camera malfunctions. One story tells the building's owner has and several employees exploring the old Swampers Tunnel. They soon discovered that it still led all the way to the old shafts of the Tough Nut mine. Safely, they made their way back to the basement, but as they approached Swampers Tunnel, they heard a loud moaning sound and heavy footsteps coming down the stairs leading to the tunnel. Sure, sure that someone had come into the building, they came out of the tunnel and immediately searched the premises, only to find the building empty and the door still locked. Perhaps Swamper was afraid they were going to find his silver. Other strange events have occurred on the staircase leading to the basement, including a female employee who have felt pushed off the last stair. Another female employee felt cold, clammy hands encircling her throat. Whatever you do, don't let the ghosts scare you. The atmosphere and food at Big Kate Saloon is wonderful. The place is a must stop. And in Tombstone, the restaurant saloon is located 417 East Allen Street. And then you have the Crystal Palace Saloon in Tombstone. There are more hauntings in Tombstone, such as allegedly haunting room 119 at the old Tombstone Hotel. Sometimes in the past, man eventually hanged himself in the room, and now guests report hearing voices and witnessing objects moving in the room. A ghostly man in a frock coat has been seen wandering near the old Wells Fargo building. Others have reported seeing apparitions of stage drivers and cowboys in front of the recreated CS Fly studio. People have reported smelling perfume even when none is present. At the renovated Crystal Palace Saloon, people say that ghosts of Big Nose Kate continues to lurk. Evidently, she lived in Tombstone. The establishment was one of her favorites. Today, staff and customers have reported the inexplicable movement of objects in different locations, lights that turn on and off by themselves, gambling wheels that spin on their own. According to the tales, Kate is not alone in the building, and yet others have spied phantom cowboys at the bar and walking around in the saloon. So that is some of the hauntings of it. The one I don't hear much about is the old Tuscan prison or Yuma prison. Can't recall which had the popular old West prison that no one wanted to go. I think that was Yuma prison. They didn't want to go. How was your week, Russell? Good fam, good fam work, dinner good. Yeah, we're all right. We're still sore and still healing. Have a good night, Jeanette. So we're gonna go ahead and get ready to wrap up. That's it on Tombstone. Um, Hope you guys enjoyed the show. My guest next week will be Jody Cook from the North American Dogman Project. He is the founder of it. We are going to do a part two, and we're going to show some video evidence and stuff they've captured of Dogman and Bigfoot. So make sure you tune in next Friday for that one. That's going to be a good show. Um, and we will be back on Sunday night. Next video. You got it, Gary. Yeah, I mean, I like doing this outlaw cowboy stuff. Doing the history and then the hauntings. I think what I'm gonna do, if you guys want it, I'm gonna start doing another show. So we'll have three, and I'll do one strictly of like the outlaws and the hauntings that they of them and stuff like that. I mean, we, I can do something like that if you guys are interested. If you are, message me or leave it in the comments on this video, even on Facebook. Um, and it'll be we can do that, and then I'll leave Friday nights for guests. When is leaving, Russell? I sent you a message. Yeah, I'm getting ready to wrap up here, Granzer. I've been on for 2 hours and 20 minutes. Oh, you're welcome, cousin Lisa. Glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, go ahead and do that. Awesome. All right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'll do that. I'll work on another show. Maybe I'll do one on the Outlaws. Maybe I'll see what my Thursday nights look like. I'll do a Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Eventually, when we slow down here, I'm gonna do a Saturday show too, again, because I know a lot of people are missing my Saturday shows. Have a good weekend, Russell. Yeah, Spaced Out Radio is about to start. Maybe some getting ready for that. And I also pondered with another idea on another podcast of doing this is separate from the paranormal. Um, Doing an outdoors podcast because I'm also an outdoorsman. I hunt, and fish, and stuff like that. So I thought about doing one of them too, doing an educational hunting podcast for hunters out there and stuff too. I've been working pondering with the idea on it. I haven't set it into motion yet, but yeah, I mean, I'll do another show, an outlaw show, and we'll talk about all the outlaws and the cowboys and stuff like that of the West and stuff like that, and the hauntings that go along with it. So it'll still be a history paranormal type show. So Yeah, I'll start putting something together for that one, and I think we'll do it on Thursday nights. So I'll do 2 shows back to back, Thursday and Friday, and I'll leave Friday's show for, like, paranormal and the guests and stuff like that. Or I could do vice versa. I could do Thursday nights for guests and then Friday nights for this type of stuff since a lot of the guests are busy on Fridays and stuff in the weekends. So, but we're going to wrap up, and remember, if you're being bullied in the paranormal field, you do have a voice. Nobody's better than anybody in this field. We're all after the same common goal to prove the existence of life after death. So, with that being said, stop the hate and stop the bullying. Nobody's better than anybody in this field. We're not professionals. We're all after the same common goal to prove the existence of life after death. So, and leave the Warrens alone. Every time we log in, that's all we see is Warrens this, Warrens that. Stop. We're done looking at it. And then we're seeing posts of Dan. Dan passed away last year. Let it be. I don't think his family needs to be reminded of it, especially his little boy that he left behind. And Annabelle had nothing to do with it, so quit with the Annabelle stuff too. So let that be said and just stop. So everybody have a good night. We will see you Sunday night with our special guests, psychic medium Rebecca and Carol Garcia. My dad and I will be back on Sunday night, and cousin Kathy will see you tomorrow. So, all right, everybody, have a good night. Stay safe out there. God bless. If you're investigating this weekend, have safe travels and stay safe out there. Have a good night, everyone.